Would you please rise and join us for the invocation? This afternoon, the invocation will be given by Pastor Doug Bankson, pastor at Victory Church World Outreach Center.
And on the same day, my grandmother gave it earlier. So that was kind of special.
Thanks.
Let's pray. Heavenly Father, thank you for stamina, for the board, the commissioners, Lord, for this long day. Thank you, Father, for wisdom and clarity. Lord, as seriously we look at the events that affect us all, we ask for wisdom and stewardship, and we handle all of the finances. Lord, we do thank you that every blessing does come from you, and you've made us stewards. So we give you the praise in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Pastor Doug. And would you please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Well, thanks very much, everyone, for those who decided to join us once again for our budget hearing. We have to do this in two stages. I understand that we first have to announce and adopt the millage rate of 34727, which is represents a 5.63 increase over the rolled back rate of 3.2876. And so, since that's the first step, correct, Jan? That's the first step. The chair would entertain a motion to announce and adopt the millage rate of 34727.
You're adopting it now.
Beg your pardon?
You don't want to adopt it yet. Without discussion.
Okay.
We need to open a public hearing, and then
Okay.
you just announce that.
Give us some guidance on the process.
All right, let me give you some guidance. If you go 3.4727, that's what you are right now. That's a tax increase. If you set it at 3.2876, which is a rollback rate, that would not be a tax increase, other than the new construction numbers. Depending on what budget cuts we make in this meeting, I think we can get to 3.2876, unless, we had $1 million here for hiring summer employees and doing things like that. If we start getting into that, you're not going to get to that number. So those are the things. Edward, would we have to announce it at the beginning of the meeting?
Yes, we have to do the military before the budget.
Okay. Well, I know that you and I spoke earlier, and there, as you mentioned, there is a way and a plan to get to the rolled back rate if we want to so choose. But in terms of the process, do we have to have a motion for a discussion, or can we just have the discussion and then go to the motion?
Let's have a motion for discussion, and then you can discuss, and we can go from there.
Okay.
About that.
All right. So for the purposes of discussion, the chair would entertain a motion to approve the millage rate of 34727. Is there a motion?
Can I get some, we're approving the 3.4?
Well,
We're not going to have a discussion?
We're having them. According to Robert's Rules of Orders, in order to have a discussion, you need to have a motion on the table. Right, Linda? Okay. Oh, okay. All right. So, based on my understanding of Robert's Rules of Order, in order to have a discussion, you have to have a motion on the table, which is why I'm asking for the motion. But we can have a lead in to this discussion, and then...
So a motion to discuss the millage rate?
Correct.
Okay.
Let's go through the presentation, and then you all can make a motion.
Okay.
Is
Right.
okay? All right.
Before we adopt the budget, we will adopt the millage rate. You'll have all that information up front. Then you can determine if you want to go with a rollback rate, or you want to do a millage rate of 3.4727, which will be a tax increase.
Okay.
Okay? Does everyone understand that?
I got it.
Yeah, go ahead and do it.
Please join us, Edward.
Okay, Mayor and Commissioners, I'm going to give you a brief overview.
Just name for the record.
Oh, I'm sorry, Edward Bass, Finance Director, City of Apopka, 150 East 5th Street. So let me give you a brief overview. I'm going to go through, it's very brief, but I'll go through each revenue line, each revenue source, and I'll go through each expenditure by function. Some of the highlights that you're going to see in that packet that you have, your packet that you have, is the millage rate, which you just talked about, in your package reflects 3.4727, which is 5.63% increase over the rollback rate of 3.2876. In this budget that you have before you, there is no increase in utility rates. Sanitation rate and the water sewer reclaim rates and the stormwater rates remaining the same. There is one new position in the budget. There are, all personnel costs are limited to merit-based increases only. There is no CPI. It's only merit-based. Health insurance reflects an 11% increase you'll see in the budget. I will tell you that we are really working hard and have some new information that we can bring that number. We have some more savings with that number, a reduction in that number. And then the budget reflects almost $9 million in total capital outlay. Some of the priorities that are included in this budget packet are there is a new fire rescue truck for $600,000. There's an ambulance replacement of $150,000. There are police vehicles of $300,000. There is a splash pad. There's some funding for a splash pad in your recreation impact fees of $250,000. There are street lights for Rock Springs Road of $120,000 in the Streets Improvement Fund. And there's some strategic planning money of $160,000. There is stormwater drainage funding, $350,000. There's some Brick Street repair and restoration, $250,000. There's some road resurfacing money, $250,000 earmarked for road resurfacing. There is a traffic light at Piedmont, Wekiva, and Green Acres. I know there was talk about the placement of that light, but there is some funding in there for that. There is some funding for 6th Street reconstruction of $1 million in your traffic impact fee fund. There's money for sidewalks, as there is every year. We have some money in there. There's $100,000. And then one of the most significant capital costs you have this year is you have almost $4 million in reclaimed water lines. Keep in mind, you've seen some of those projects and have talked about some of those in your other meetings about the grants that we're getting from St. John's Water Management District. So that's why you see a significant increase in the reclaimed water lines. For your citywide revenues, this is a brief summary. I'm going to go through each line for you. You can see that property tax are up. This increase reflects the 3.4727. Franchise fees and utility tax, there's kind of a small reduction in those numbers. Licenses and permits, you see a 6% increase in those numbers. Intergovernmental revenue, you see almost a little more than 9.5% increase. This increase you see represents the increase in state revenue sharing and sales tax, state sales tax. The state has given us an increase. The estimate that they've given us shows us an increase. Charges for services, you see a 2.2% increase. Again, this number right here contains a lot of the enterprise funds, the sanitation fund, the water and sewer funds. Because we're not increasing those rates, you don't see a big increase in revenue here. The increase you see here would be due to growth or increased usage, and weather can also affect that number. Fines and forfeitures are down 11%. You'll notice that's in traffic red light camera. Those fines are down. The impact fees are up 6%. That's reflective of, we've seen some movement with some new homes, so you see a little improvement there. Investment earnings are down. We've had a lot of monies that we've put into some projects or whatever, so you see a little less money available to finance, plus rates don't seem to be getting any better. So we're working hard, and we're trying to get that number up the best we can, but those, as you've seen out there, that rates aren't really that, they're not very positive. Miscellaneous revenue is up 10%. That can be some different sources of revenues that we've had earmarked or whatever that we're using in places. It's also revenues that aren't recognized anywhere up in these revenue sources. So they're not specifically identified in those revenue sources. So they fall in that category. Non-operating revenues represent your transfers, your carryovers from other carryover funding from year to year, projects that are ongoing or that have carryover funding. But the majority of that is transfers amongst the funds. And then this last one you see here is brand new. This is your special assessments that you just adopted, the ordinance that you adopted at the 1:30 meeting. That is the revenue that will be assessed through those assessments for those 3 properties that you saw. So overall, you can see that revenues are up 3.11%, which represents a number of about $65.5 million. I'm sorry, $68.5 million. That's your revenue source. These are all revenue numbers. This graph shows you where those revenues come from. As you can see, property tax only represents 11% of the total revenues. Charges for services represent 33%. It is your biggest revenue source. Intergovernmental revenues, which are your sales tax, your state revenue sharing, those numbers that come from grants or other government sources, are 15%. And so that pretty much, you can see impact fees represent 5%. So that kind of shows, gives you a picture of where the revenues are coming from. This side is the expense side, and this is by function. So I'll start with general government. As you can see, general government is up 17.8% from last year. Community development is up 3.3%. Transportation is not quite a percent. Public safety is up 8.5%. Public services is up 5.25%. Culture and recreation is up. Again, this reflects the splash pad that I talked about earlier is in this number. Stormwater is very small increase. Community redevelopment is about 3% increase. And this is the agreement that we have with the incubator. That's the funding that we approved for the 5 years for the incubator. General debt service and transfers, you see, is up 4%. This does reflect the new loans that you just approved for the sanitation trucks and the CNG station. That funding is here. The utility system, as you can see, it got almost a 0.5% decrease, and that is reflective of, we had a lot more projects last year. We had bigger projects last year than what we have this year, so we don't have as much capital funded in there because some of the projects you've approved already. So that number is why, that's why you, and again, those expenditures are not there, so therefore you don't see an increase in those expenditures. Sanitation has a small increase of 1.6%, and some of that increase, portion of that increase is due to the new loan. You just had the loan on the sanitation trucks, so it is included in there too, because you'll have your first debt payment next year. And then the special districts, 66,940, that's your new expenditures, and those are the expenditures that were talked about with the fence, the repairs and maintenance, those items. And as you see, the assessment revenue and the expenses balance. Because the goal is the assessments, the amount of the assessment that you set will recover the cost. There's no, it's not an enterprise fund, it's a special revenue fund. So the revenue comes in and the revenue goes out for that purpose. So you'll see the bottom, 69.822, 69,822,000 roughly, 5% increase. So you can see that earlier we were 3.1% in revenue, and we have, staff's been through the budget and gotten it to this point. But as you can see, there's still approximately a $1.2 million difference between the revenues and the expenditures, which is that 2% difference you see, 3.1 revenues, 5% in expenses. This shows you where your expenses are going, where the money's going. You can see 36% of it goes to public safety. It's your biggest piece of the pie. The utility system represents 30%. Give you some of the other ones. That one on the bottom's a little bit, didn't come out very good, but transportation is 7%. General government is 7%. Your special districts are such a small amount that they don't even register a percentage. And sanitation is 6%. So this overall, as you can see, roughly 66% of the budget is utility system and public safety. This is the tax rate comparison. I wanted to show you this. We don't have all the 15 numbers in because the budget hearings are just starting to begin. Actually, today is the first day you can hold one, so we are one of the first. But these numbers, we will have these at your next meeting to show you what rates were set in the tentative budgets across the county. But as you can see, we still have the lowest tax rate. Employees per capita, as you can see, that's down. We're not hiring a lot of employees, so that number continues to decline a little bit. Total property tax revenue, last year was 6.9, estimated 6.9. This year, if we do the 3.4727, it'll be 7.282, $7,282,800. Because you can see we're still nowhere near where we were back in 9 and 10. This is your budget comparison. It shows your annual budget comparison. You can see this budget is just shy of $70 million. So there are some increases in this budget. As you see from the expenditure line, we're 5% more than we were the prior year. And then what has happened, you will see on one of your other packets, I think it said that we would have our final hearing on the 17th. Well, the state has contacted us and said the earliest we can have it is the 18th. Unfortunately, we can't have it on the 18th because the 18th is when the county holds theirs and they have priority over us. So we have established a date of September the 19th at 5:15 to hold the final hearing. And at that time, you will have to adopt a final millage rate and a final budget number.
Which is a Friday night.
Which is a Friday night. At 5:15, it has to be after 5. So 5:15 is what we've always traditionally done.
So we're doing it as soon as possible after the state tells us we can do it.
Correct.
And there is a football game that night.
I think it's 7:30 though, so.
Yeah, hopefully we'll be
so
okay.
Maybe. But, so anyway, that is my presentation. It's very brief, but we can answer any questions you have. I'm sure Richard has some things as well, so.
Any questions from the council?
I have a question.
Commissioner Dean.
On the $1 million that's appropriated for 6th Street, is that the east end, the north end, or the total street?
It's the east end near where we just did the renovations on the pond, March Pond.
Okay. That's what I was... Okay.
Any other questions by the council?
Edward, how much money do we have in reserve?
Well, I guess it depends which one you're looking at. Are you talking the general fund, probably? In the general fund, you have I think it's right at $8 million. I don't have that exact number in front of me, but it's right at $8 million. But I will tell you, and I want to stress this point, that your reserve levels are right where they are. The GFOA always gives us a recommended percentage, and they tell us it should be around 16%, 17%, but they say that because we are in an area that is susceptible to storms, hurricanes, that we should be closer to 20 or 25%.
But if our general budgets, and just looking at this is what, 34 million?
34 million is your general.
Wouldn't that be about 24%?
Right, but again, like I said, they recommend you. They
so we're at the high end, right?
We're at the high end, correct, of your reserve level. Correct. Keep in mind, if a storm comes or we have an issue, that's where we would have to go for it. That's our rainy day fund. And that also affects your borrowing rate, the rates that you just got, that was something that was looked at. They look at that, and that was one of the significant pieces that gave us that rate of 1.07 in sanitation because their reserve levels, and also the 1.92. They look at that. That's a very important, it's a big factor. So,
But I keep hearing even from staff, we're okay, if we stayed at the rollback with no increase, everything looks good. I mean, a month ago, we were $12 million in the black, and
well, but
the
you're
in
still,
the red, and
It was,
so I commend you. You've done a lot of work. I mean, we're heading in a direction that I like. I just,
keep in mind, we're still out 1.2. We've
Yeah.
got some decisions to make. We're at 1.2, but if you go back to the 3.28, which is the rollback rate, then you're going to have to shave another 382, I
it's
think.
381.
380.
920.
So almost 382 that you've got to shave off in addition to the 1.2 to roll that back, because these numbers reflect the 3.47 that you set at your proposed rate.
But
meeting.
I'm also hearing that we're on the high end. So at 24% of our general budget in reserve,
Correct.
same season's over.
You are on the high end of the range they recommend.
So,
any other questions by the council?
The increase on public safety, where is the increase?
That increase is the rescue truck you see is in there. There's some other, the police vehicles are in there. So
The rescue truck, is that an ambulance?
that's the,
No, it's a heavy rescue truck. It's the one that carries all their extrication equipment, all their specialized equipment.
Okay,
The ambulance, there's an ambulance in there too.
right.
okay.
So if we keep it where it is, you're saying we still have to trim 300 and something thousand. It did look, the numbers you're going through there, I was trying to see which ones you might be susceptible to reducing. It looks like it's pretty, I couldn't see anything in there.
There's some options that I think we ought to look at. Number one, and we've had these discussions already about the rolling stock. As you know, one of the first areas that we cut with the economy being the way it was rolling stock capital purchases. So we knew we were going to have to start doing some catch up there. And one of the things we had discussed is about doing a loan for that equipment. And if we do that similar to what we did with the sanitation budget, there's $600,000 for roughly $1,050,000 that we could finance there. So that's going to knock $1 million off that number, and then you add in your debt service for that. I think the 1.2, the heavy rescue truck, we can finance that for a longer term because they usually last about 20 to 25 years. We usually finance for around 10 years when we do those. The police cars and the ambulance, I wouldn't recommend financing those any more than 5 years. But if we do that, then we're talking about probably about a $850,000 savings just by doing that finance there. By the time you put the debt service back in for the loan, and then you can purchase that equipment. So that'll get us almost over halfway there.
You're still increasing your long-term debt, though.
Yeah, but the money right now isn't costing us anything to speak of.
Right.
At 1%, these will come in at pretty close to that 1% number. So,
On the rolling stock, though, I mean, we need to
Yeah.
look at.
What has been our practice in the past in terms of purchasing rolling stock?
the larger pieces of equipment for fire department, we've usually financed all of those. Police cars, we have done it in the past. It's just been how we were budgeting what we felt we could do that year. We've done it both ways on police. So it's not it's not anything we haven't done. And I think if you probably look around at most communities, that's not an unusual thing to
Given the
finance
fact that
rolling.
interest rates
Yeah.
are so low right now.
Right. When you're talking 1% money, that's,
Of wasn't.
It's pretty hard to turn that loan down.
You're right.
And so, in terms of our overall strategy, trying to get where we want to be, tell us again how much the financing, how.
We haven't done it, and I'm using the numbers you just saw today from the sanitation trucks. That came in at 1.07%. It was what, $1.2 million, I think we borrowed on it, or
Right.
1.1 million on that. So the debt service on that was around $200,000. That was a 5-year finance on those. So if you did the 600, finance that one for longer, then naturally that's going to be lower, which is what we normally would do with that rescue truck purchase. And then did a 5-year finance on the ambulance and the other $450,000 for police and fire. That number is probably going to be about half that cost. So, I think you're probably going to be under that $200,000 for that debt service on that $1,050,000 expenditure.
And as Commissioner Aerosmith mentioned, it does increase our long-term debt issue.
But
is there a range?
Yeah, we're not anywhere near where, we need to worry about what our rates are going to be, what our bond rates and those things are going to be with the debt that we're carrying with the city right now.
So we'll still have a lot of room to work with?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah? Okay. And so how close does all this financing get us to the...
We're still going to work between now and the next meeting.
Okay.
Let me add a few other things. We've got the splash pad in there. We're applying for grants on that. I would recommend that you put that splash pad in subject to a grant. So if we don't get the grant, then we'll come back and revisit it. Unless you feel strongly that you need the $250,000 in there for that splash pad. Also, the $250,000 for the splash pad is based on if it's placed at Northwest Rec, because we have some reclaimed water out there that we can use to, not reclaimed, we're closer to the site, so it would be easier to put that in that location. If we move it, there's Public Works said there's going to be an additional cost, so keep that in mind when we're doing it. We don't care where we put it, just keep in mind that there is an additional cost if we move it someplace other than Northwest Rec. Okay?
And just on that little topic alone, at the League of Cities, there was some vendors there who sell splash pads, and they mentioned the grant funding that is often available.
Right,
So.
and I just think that's a prudent move on the city's part right now. We can say, yes, we want the splash pad subject to grant availability. Mr. Bass talked a little bit about health insurance. As you know, we've been working hard on that. I think they'd recommended 11% is what they came in. We've negotiated to 7%. I think we're actually going to be closer to about 5 or 6%. So we'll see some more savings there. And then just going through the budget, there's some more places that I think we can squeeze out some money to get where we need to go. Still, there's some additional items in there. There's what we said, $250,000 just for brick streets that we haven't budgeted before. Those are some things that we can look at. Additionally, if we want to get really creative with the financing of these vehicles, we can wait to mid-year to actually order those and get the loan, and the payment would not be due until the following year. So you don't have to hit it in this budget year if we really plan it out just right.
The only problem you run into, I think, especially with police cars, is it's just like, I don't have a lien on my car, but I pay $500 a month for upkeep.
Right.
If something's going wrong with it all the time, so.
And those are some of the reasons, if you look at the budget this year, you see some R&M costs that are higher because we've got an older fleet right now.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I think we need to.
So those are some things that I think that we can do. I would recommend that we go ahead and finance those and reduce that cost. We've done it in the past, and I don't think it's a bad situation, especially most of the folks that get into problems with is when they're financing vehicles that are not going to last the lifetime that they financed it for. And in this case, we're not going to be at that level.
Okay.
And I think we can, I think it's a prudent decision on the commission's part there. And there's some, as I said, the $250,000 for the brick streets, that's a commission decision. Do you want to do that right now, or can we hold that one off for a year? Just some odds and ends there. So,
Well, can we ask which brick streets are we talking about?
Central Avenue, that one block
Central from
from 441 going north,
how far north?
probably about 3 blocks.
3 blocks.
Yeah, whatever we can do to the 250.
Okay, all right. So now we know. That's
Which bricks?
Central. It's the street that's 1 block to the west of here,
Right.
on the other side of 441, on the north side of 441.
Oh, okay.
How, when you come up to it, it's pretty bumpy right now.
Yeah, it is. I know which one he's talking about.
And this is something that I had mentioned to Mr. Dredge. It'd be nice to be able to take care of that. But again, it's a matter of priority and what we want to do first versus what we want to do maybe a year or so from now.
On that, on the brick street, you're talking about redoing the bricks or redoing the street? Which,
No, what we're going to do,
John, can you come to the mic so we can capture this on the recording?
we're going to take the curb, they are in bad shape, take the curb, put a new curb. Also, we take the brick and put a new base and put the same brick back.
put the same bricks back? Yeah, that's what I was wondering if we, I'm not sure, from a feasibility standpoint, do you know if you just took 1 block, for instance, the block from 441 just to 3rd Street, and just took that 1 block, comparatively speaking, if you went in and twirled out, put new curbs in, and just did a paved street in there for that first block, seems to get the most traffic, cost-wise, do you know?
Cost will be, for paving would be less.
Half?
Yes, probably close to
Yeah,
it.
that's my only thought.
Right,
I mean,
but-
the brick streets are cute, but I mean, if you could go just 1 block north and save half, it seems like it'd be more feasible with, all the commercial businesses that empty at that intersection coming out to 441. I know residents like the brick streets on further to the north where the homes are, and I agree with making that smoother. I mean, I don't come down Orange Street. I hate it. And it just, it rattles your teeth out. But it's, we've been through that over the years where we talked about doing away with the brick streets, and the residents prefer that. And
Yeah, we try to
I think it's
resolve
part of
it.
the charm. It's part of the
Yeah.
charm.
yeah,
of
it
everything.
is. I don't know the charm needs to come all the way to,
But,
in this first block of 441.
everybody wishes.
Does that not get a lot of Lynx bus traffic?
Not right there.
I don't
Never.
think so.
Not right there. Okay, thank you, John. All right. So,
I'd like to make a motion that we go to the rollback. They've been working really hard to get the numbers, and we're only 300,000 out. We got 2 more weeks to work on it. I made a promise that I wouldn't raise taxes. And I certainly don't want to here when at least staff is saying it's encouraging and they can get there.
all right, well, there's a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
All right, there's a motion and a second to go to the rollback rate of 3.2876. Is there any further discussion by the council? If not, we'll open it up for a public hearing. At this time, is there anyone from the public who wishes to address the proposal of going with the rollback rate of 3.2876? Mr. Lannon.
but then go into the rollback rate of 3.27, whatever.
3.28.
Is a great idea. You just heard your administrator tell you that the possibility of your health insurance going up only 5 or 6%, and they proposed at $8 million at 11%. Well, I'm not real good about that math, but it seems to me the cost would come down to around $6 million or something like that. So, I mean, you got at least a $4 million savings right there. So, shouldn't have any problem at all balancing the budget.
Okay. Sue Kidd, would you like to come up and address us? I beg your pardon?
I was just saying the clock was on someone else's time.
Okay.
Okay. I actually was not planning on addressing the rollback rate. I was just going to talk about what we had originally on the budget from going with the 3.47 rate. May I speak to that?
Sure.
Okay. The tentative budget for next year resulting from leaving the millage rate where it is currently will yield an increase of $3.3 million more than the city had to work with for this year. Now, I didn't hear everything Mr. Bass said coming in, so maybe that figure is not quite as high as I had. But at any rate, the increase to me is good news. What was not good news as I looked through this was that certain budget decisions that were being made and reflected in these pages are being made without any kind of a strategic plan or vision in place that actually can guide the things that people want to see happening in the budget. And that threaten to eat up that increase, leaving not very much to address some of the community wishes that have been expressed during the most recent city council meetings. The citywide expenditure summary by type, and I don't have the page number right in front of me, it was one of the early pages, shows that $1,874,150 of this additional money coming in, that going by the 3.3 million dollar figure, that would have been 56% of the increase is being taken up by personnel service expenses. Now, I understand that the 11% increase for health insurance is now going to be much lower, which is really good. It was one of the things I was going to say. I don't know how much work was done to try to bring that figure down. Nearly $900,000 of that extra money would go to increases in operating expenses. Fully 27% of the increase would go for increases in operating expenses. Now, I know fuel goes up and all of those kind of things, but when you look through every single budget category, there are operating expenses that perhaps don't have to be there or could be lower. And I'm going to call a couple of those out in just a moment. So those two categories alone eat up about 83% of the increase between personnel services and increase in operating expenses. While most departments have posted very modest salary increases, and a couple of them actually had decreases, in my mind, the most egregious increase was in the Office of the Administrative Services, where regular salaries are due to increase by $85,910. That's 17.6%. Plus $11,000 in other salaries and wages that is not explained on that budget sheet. While most departments have no additional personnel, despite the fact that they have clear workload demands that could possibly benefit by an additional person, Administrative Services gets to add another worker. I don't know what it is that that additional worker will do in that department. Operating expenses have some decidedly questionable expenses and increases over last year. And in this, I'm not going to be sparing. The mayor's office, travel and per diem expenses are going from $4,000 last year to $20,000 this year. That's a $16,000 increase. I guess my question is why? Books, subscriptions, and memberships going from $32,000 this year to $42,750 next year, an increase of 33.5%. Why? What is taking up $42,000 in books, subscriptions, and memberships? Okay, we already addressed the issue of the insurance, and it looks like I'm running out of time. Do I have permission to continue?
One more minute.
All right, there was no capital outlay sheet, but I did see that the $250 for the splash pad, $250,000 was allocated. I hear now that that would be only if it was placed at the Northwest Recreation Center. We haven't determined where it should go. We need a strategic plan to tell us where should things go. We don't know where we're headed in this. And that brings up the issue of the report, the Wingo report. On page 20 of the Wingo report, it's pointed out that, quote, the city of Apopka has no organization-wide strategic planning process emanating from the mayor and council that establishes a clear mission, vision, and goal direction for the city. So just a couple suggestions. I'm sure you won't like them, but I'm going to say it anyway. Number one, what would happen if we just rolled the salary increases back, didn't even do them? Our people are being paid a reasonably fair wage when you compare it to other cities. It's not that I don't want to see them get a raise, but maybe what we do this year is we take the extra and we put it in a reserve fund for whatever the strategic plan shows that people want to see happen in the city, and then we've got some money in the budget to do it. Or if that's not good enough, maybe give the increases to the small staff, the lower staff. Department heads are doing pretty well in this case. Another alternative possibly would be consider extending the current budget, letting the extra money coming from the 3.47 millage again go into reserve until we know where to spend it from the strategic plan. So I agree with the CAO. Maybe we can squeeze out some more money from somewhere. And those were a couple things that I thought might help to squeeze. Thank you.
Thank you, Sue. Let me just address a couple of the questions that she brought up, especially with regards to the mayor's budget. The travel and per diem number, well, first of all, the membership number, one of the things that I've asked for is for the city of Apopka to join the National League of Cities, which is it's a national organization similar to the Florida League of Cities. One of the things, the opportunities that I've learned from my initial conversations with the National League of Cities is that they have staffers who are devoted to finding resources and grants for cities like Apopka. It turns out I happen to know the executive director of the National League of Cities, a man named Clarence Anthony, whom I've known for about 10 years. He is willing to set aside staff time specifically devoted to finding additional resources for the National League of Cities. They have resources in the area of education, resources in the area of developing community vision. So there's lots of opportunities there, and they have conferences, and of course, if we belong to the National League of Cities, I would expect that some of our commissioners might want to go to those conferences as well. So that's why you see the increases in membership and travel and per diem for those, for that specific reason. I can't remember the other questions that you posed with regards to the mayor's budget. Anyway, okay. All right. Any other comments from the public? Dr. Shackelford.
Ray Shackelford, 2082 Carpethanian Drive. I am a former vice president for institution effectiveness, and part of my responsibility was to assess programs and services based on a strategic plan and budget. I have heard a lot of comments with respect to the organizational study that was done. Based on my experience, when you do an assessment is not based on experiences. Assessment is based on data. So we need to keep that in mind as we look at that organizational study. I was glad to hear, and I also read it about it in the audit report, that we have in reserve at least $8 million. It would be nice if this council would consider setting some of that funds aside for our young people during the summer. Again, I will continue to push for a need for a summer jobs program for our children and to support community organizations. Also, too, Ms. Kidd and I was somewhat thinking alike, because I wanted to know, why is there a 95% increase for the mayor's office? She addressed, why is there an increase from $72,000 to $100,000 for the city attorney when we were told that the amount would be $3,000 a month or $36,000 a year? Why is there a decrease for the city clerk's office? Why is there a 23% increase for information technology? I assume we're trying to catch up, which is appropriate. But at the end of the day, if we do not reach out to our young people, other criminal elements will reach out to them. And we must do everything we can to help and invest in our children. And another thing, too, is, again, on that report, the consultant used a model based on many variables. But when she got to the city of Apopka, she selected some variables. The question is, how did she make those variables she selected for the city of Apopka viable? How can she validate the variables that she used for the city of Apopka? So again, as we move forward in you looking at this study, we need to think about that assessment is data-driven, not based on experiences. Last but not least, I just want to emphasize, too, I think the 3.4727 will be a way to help us fund our summer programs for our young people. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Shackelford. Anyone else from the public? If not, we'll close it. We'll close the public hearing and bring it back to the council. There's a motion on the table to approve the adopt the rollback rate of 3.2876. There's a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? If not, we'll vote. All in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. All right. So now we need to adopt the tentative budget, correct?
Correct. And that number will be $68,564,050.
Okay. All right. Is there a motion from the chair will entertain a motion to approve the budget recommended by the city administrator?
So moved.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Dean. Is there any further discussion by the council? Is there? Go ahead.
I'd like to add to Mr. Shackelford's. We ran on a vision of what we thought Apopka was going to be, and I would just plead to staff to really look at some areas that I think we need help. That strategic plan is, we've got to get a clear handle on that, but the community development side of it, if we're trying to sell a vision of what we want to look at, I want to get away from the tacos. I want to create a department that's going to go out and cheerlead something that wants to come here.
Right.
Not something that's just finding a nice piece of property and makes a deal with an owner, which I am totally for. But I want staff to go out and recruit some of these businesses and want them to come here. And in order to do that, you got to have a team that's out there selling Apopka. And if it looks like we're just holding community development back by looking at what we're doing to their department, the athletic department. We got one of the, I don't know if anybody turned on the TV last night. We had another Apopka kid on national TV pitching in a game. The 6th inning, Michael Taylor, a homegrown kid from Apopka, is up to bat. All that was started here. I love our public safety departments. I want them up front for, I have no problems with that, but I want to turn some interest back to these other departments. And it's kind of troubling. Everybody complains about the streets and the sidewalks, and if you look here, grounds maintenance, it's at 0.4. Everything that I like is on the back burner, And the things that rightfully so ought to be up front, or the disparity between the two, it don't pass the fair test.
Well, I think we're generally headed in this big direction that you talked about. Number one, as Richard said a month or so ago, city revenues generally lag behind the general economy anywhere from 1 to 2 to 3 years. And so we're still in a process of playing catch up. We have been in a depressed economy for the last, since 2007. And so we've delayed some of the purchases that we ordinarily would have made had the economy not been going strong. So I think if you look at what we're doing in total here, we're starting to play catch up and starting to lay down some of the priorities for the big direction that we want to go. I think the strategic visioning thing, I know that the number that is in there is 160. We may not have to do it for 160. We may be able to do it for less. But nonetheless, it's set aside in the budget there. And I think as a council, we can also start to hold earlier discussions about budget priorities, again, mentioned in that organizational development analysis. Start some strategic discussions here at the council level that will give the staff guidance over the year as they start the budget season next, April, May, and June.
I sit here and, our police and fire are fantastic, but the people that talk to them, the frontline people or the dispatcher that answers the phone, you look here, dispatch is 0.7, but their overtime cost to the city is $45,000. I just, sometimes when numbers reach out to me. I see numbers. And I just want to throw some kudos. Monday was a holiday for everybody but my garbage guy. He was there on time. I almost want to go out there and say, hey, man, I know nobody else does, but I love you.
All right.
My garbage can was full.
Okay, so there's a motion and a second to approve the budget recommended by the city administrator. Any further discussion? If not, we'll vote. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Is there anything else for the good of the order?
I would, before we get out of here.
Again, as Edward mentioned earlier, our final budget hearing will be on September the 19th, which is a Friday at 5:15 p.m. It says 17th on the board, but we corrected it. We developed information late today that indicated that the state didn't want us to hold it on the day that we had on that day. We had to hold it after the 18th. The county's hearing is on the 18th, so the 19th is the first day that we can do it after the state allows us to do it. Anything else?
I do.
Yes, sir.
And I'll be short. Monroe sidewalk and Old Dixie sidewalk from Hawthorne to Park. And I'll be with.
You'd like a sidewalk?
Well, those people are asking.
Okay. Let's see if we can work that in. All right? Yes, sir, Mr. Landon.
I just have to say, from a citizen standpoint, I think this has been the most ridiculous budget process I've ever seen. At the very least, it's disrespectful for you guys as commissioners and elected officials. And by that, I mean, you don't need to be given a budget and have 4 days notice or 5 days notice to vote it up or down. You need to have this thing evolved over a long period of time. And I realize 3 of you have just taken office, but it's just ridiculous to expect all the questions to be answered when you've only had a limited time to look at it and think about it. And it just, to me, it borderlines on incompetence by the staff. Because they've known these numbers or have an idea of some of these numbers for a long time, and you haven't heard not one notice of any of them.
Have you ever worked on the city budget?
Yeah, for a lot of years.
I'll be darned.
And we always gave you a budget come the first part of July.
Really?
Well,
And it was a balanced budget. That doesn't mean there weren't changes.
one conversation at a time.
But, and the other aspect is the new budget year is getting ready to start. And if you guys are going to implement those recommendations that the study gave you, you need to do it. Because the budget is more than just numbers. It's symbolic in many aspects. Your staff needs to know who's in charge. And that was mentioned in the study. Are we going to have a strong mayor form of government? That's great. If you are, then you need to make some changes. If you're not, and you're going to have a city manager form of government, more power to you. That's your right to decide. But in all honesty, I like you, Mayor. I really do. I think you're doing a great job. But if you're just going to be a ribbon cutter, we don't need a ribbon cutter paying that much money for. So, anyway.
Thank you, Mr. Lane. Hold on, Dr. Shackford. I just want to address this. I appreciate what Mr. Landon said.
I don't.
Well, I respect his right to say it. We'll say that. We're all human beings here. We're all working together, and we're all moving forward as best we can. I agree. The process could be have been done a little earlier. I would have liked to have seen that, but we're doing the best we can, given the system that has been in place, the deadlines that have always been in place. I've been here 4.5 months, so and there have been a lot of issues, and it's not like we haven't done. There's been a lot of things happening at the city of Apopka, and there's a lot happening behind the scenes. So I'm coming down on the side of everyone who's here is doing the best they can with the system that's in place and the way that things have always run. We will make changes. You will see the changes that we have been talking about come about in a way that is orderly and deliberate and well thought out and discussed by the elected officials who are here and discussed by the members of the public. I just speak for myself. I have tried to encourage discussion by the public. I've been tried to encourage discussion by members of the council. And I think, even though that doesn't sound like something that's completely radical, I think that represents some change from the way that things used to be. Now, I'm not going to criticize anything that happened in the past because I don't think that's productive. But I do think you are seeing changes start to take place on a basis that is very steady and very deliberate. And I'm just going to tell everybody, that's my style. I'm not a bull in a china shop. I'm going to move slow. So, I appreciate your comments. Anyone else? Dr. Shackelford.
Ray Shackelford, 2082 Carpethania Drive. Again, as you look at the organizational study, I would ask you to be careful about some of those recommendations. Again, assessments are data-driven. Assessments are not based on personal experiences. Also, too, I just want to reach out to you again, and I will continue to reach out to you, to find funds to set aside for summer youth programs for our young people. If we do not get them or guide them the way we want them to go, some other entity may do so. And if we do not invest in our children, we're going to lose our children to other endeavors that they should not be exposed to. Again, it's my understanding that you have $8 million in reserve. Please consider that as an option for the summer jobs program in the community organization. But moreover, I also again caution you to be careful how you implement those recommendations. If those recommendations are not data driven, I will caution you against implementing those recommendations and study. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Shucks. All right. Anyone else? Pastor Doug.
Doug Bankson, 585 East Sandpiper Street. I just want to say I do appreciate the commission leaning on the side of frugality just because of where that economy has been, and the people are still feeling that. So I think it's a wisdom, it would be wonderful to have, more funds, and there's plenty of places to put them, So I do want to commend you for leaning that direction. And we know how big the pie is going to be now, and so taking the next days to look at all of these different aspects. I do agree that, obviously in the line of work that I'm in, I always agree in reaching out to our younger generation. But I think there's other ways to do that rather than it being the job of the city to take on all of those things, maybe working together with all the nonprofits, challenging nonprofits. I think there's some things we can do that keeps it off of the city rolls and still see those goals coming together as a community. And I would say, for one, with what I do and other ministers and nonprofits, I would like to bring our minds together and maybe even have the city challenge. What can we do together to come up with some solutions so that there is something for the future without it being something on the tax roll? And finally, this, I think one of the benefits that we do have in Apopka, because we have a lot of benefits. I love this city and thankful that God chose to give me a beach ministry here in Florida. But I think one of the benefits that we have is on that graph, we are on that lower end of the tax structure. And I think maybe if in our coming together to try and market the city more, that might not bring more residents, which will bring a greater financial base, which will get us the things that we want without having to raise the tax burden. Once the economy starts rolling, I still want to be on that lower end. I just think it's a good, wise thing. And again, staying on the higher end of our rainy day fund, I think that's just good wisdom. So, I do want to thank you all for moving in that direction.
Thank you, Pastor Doug. All right. Anyone else? If not, we are adjourned.
Do I have to get a material position form to sign that I turn it over to you? See, if my company was signed.